We good? Okay. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Planning, Housing, Economic, and Development Committee. The usual chair of this committee has an excused absence, so I will be chairing in her place. Could we have a roll call
Chair Oriana,
here?
Councilmember Adam Stafford,
Present.
Councilmember Denoga, Councilmember Olson.
Here.
4 members present at roll call.
Thank you. So we have a roughly light agenda today. We will be starting off with our first in our long budget season. So we'll be hearing from the People's Zoning Council. So I'll pass it to our committee director for orientation.
Good morning, Chair and members of the Planning, Housing, and Economic Development Committee. We will first do our first budget overview or work session for FY 2027. I will provide a brief overview of the People's Zoning Council's fiscal year 2027 budget and explain to you what the People's Zoning Council does. The People's Zoning Council is present at all hearings on zoning matters and is empowered to summons and cross-examine witnesses, introduce documentary evidence, file exceptions, and present arguments as the evidence and law may warrant. The county's FY 2027 proposed general budget includes $250,000 in funding for the People's Zoning Council, the same level as what was improved in the FY 2026 budget. This funding supports the work of one contract attorney. The office's workload includes reviewing planning board, zoning hearing examiner, and district council cases, as well as responding to zoning issues raised by residents. Expenses for the Zoning People's Council are recovered from the Maryland National Capital Park and Planning budget as a project charge from the administration fund. Thank you, Chair. That concludes my overview, and if I may, I'll turn to Mr. Stan Brown.
Good morning, everyone. I've reviewed the county executive's recommendation for fiscal year 2027, and I concur with her recommendation.
Thank you. Are there any questions for my colleagues? Yes, Councilmember Denoga.
Trying to do the math. 30 years? 31?
Just about 30.
We need a succession plan. Not to rush you out, but
Right.
but just to observe.
Yes.
No, that's a very good point. So are you recommending to work in like a second position into the budget model?
I think we just need to talk about, I don't think Mr. Brown has indicated he's looking to move on anytime soon, but we just need to be thinking about this because you can't train somebody overnight.
No, very fair point. Thank you for that. Any other questions or comments? Thank you for your presentation.
You guys have a good day.
You as well. All right, next, moving on, we will have a briefing around zoning ordinance, flexible zoning tools. Again, I'll pass it to our committee director to orient us.
Yes, Madam Chair, we have from the Planning Department, Mr. James Hunt, who is the acting planning director. We also have Ms. Katina Schulers, who is the acting planning director, Ms. Sherry Connor, who's our development review division chief, Mr. David Warner, who's principal counsel, and they will be providing a briefing to you regarding flexible zoning tools. Thank you. I'll pass it to Director Hunt. Thank you.
Good morning. For the record, James Hunt, Acting Planning Director with the Prince George's Planning Department. It is a wonderful day to be before you on such a great topic. I'm really excited to talk to you all today regarding flexible zoning tools that are both currently in the zoning ordinance and some things that, that are available that the council could definitely take a look at to be able to provide more flexibility in the zoning ordinance. With me today, I'd like to, first of all, say good morning to each of you, but also welcome our team here. We have Acting Deputy Planning Director Katina Scholers. We also have, just like Director Hightower said earlier, Division Chief Connors here, who's over our Development Review Team. And then we have our Principal Counsel, David Warner, here with us today as well. These tools that we are going to be providing you today are critical to implementing the county's planning policy. Let me kind of get it up on the screen here. There we go. All right. So these tools are critical to implementing county planning policy, supporting redevelopment, and addressing housing and economic development goals. I'll highlight how these zoning tools allow the county to respond to changing development conditions while maintaining compatibility with surrounding communities. Second here. There we go. Okay, thank you. The purpose of this briefing is to provide a high-level overview of how zoning flexibility works in the current zoning ordinance. Specifically, we will discuss tools that allow flexibility in development design, use mix, and development standards. These tools help the county achieve policy goals such as increased housing production, revitalization of commercial corridors, and transit-oriented development. Understanding these tools is important because many development applications that come before the council rely on them. The Prince George's County Planning Department administers and reviews zoning applications to ensure compliance with the ordinance and adopted plans. Staff provide technical analysis and recommendations to the Planning Board and the County Council. The department also works closely with applicants, communities, and other agencies to ensure that development projects support county policy goals. Our role is to facilitate high-quality development while protecting community character and advancing the county's long-term planning vision. The new zoning ordinance represents the most comprehensive modernization of zoning regulations in the county in decades. It is simplified, or I should say modernized, with these regulations from the previous zoning structure and introduced new zoning districts better aligned with modern development patterns. The ordinance was designed to support mixed-use development, transit-oriented growth, and reinvestment in aging commercial areas. Importantly, the ordinance also incorporates tools that allow flexibility while maintaining clear development standards. Traditional zoning systems were designed for single-use suburban development patterns. However, today's development market requires greater flexibility to support mixed use, walkable communities, and redevelopment of underutilized properties. Flexible zoning tools allow the county to adapt regulations to unique site conditions and evolving market demands. They also help ensure that development projects contribute to broader public benefits such as housing, infrastructure improvements, and environmental sustainability. The ordinance includes several mechanisms that provide flexibility in land development. These tools include planned development zones, mixed-use zoning districts, overlay zones, flexible regulatory processes, special exceptions, variances, and zoning map amendments. Each tool serves a different purpose and operates at a different stage of the development review process. Together, they allow the county to accommodate innovative development while maintaining appropriate oversight. To start off, we can start talking about the planned development zones, which provide one of the most flexible development tools in the zoning ordinance. These zones, I should say, allow a site to be planned comprehensively rather than applying rigid standards parcel by parcel. Planned development projects often include a mix of uses and allow modifications to traditional development standards such as setbacks, density, and building placement. This tool is particularly useful for large development sites or master planned communities. Mixed-use zoning districts are designed to support activity centers and corridors while multiple land uses can coexist. These zones allow residential, retail, office, and institutional uses within the same development or district. The goal is to create walkable environments where residents can live, work, and access services without relying entirely on automobiles. Mixed-use zoning also supports redevelopment of older commercial areas by allowing housing and other uses to be integrated. Overlay zones, another useful tool, adds an additional layer of regulations or incentives on top of the base zoning district. These overlays address specific policy priorities such as environmental protection, transit-oriented development or corridor revitalization. Rather than changing the underlying zoning classification, the overlay provides targeted standards that apply only within defined geographic areas. This approach allows the county to address special planning objectives without completely rezoning properties. Some examples that you'll find in some of the districts can include the Chesapeake Bay Critical Area Overlay, as well as the Aviation Policy or the MIO zone, in addition to the Neighborhood Conservation Overlay Zone. The zoning ordinance also provides flexible opportunities to meet regulations and help reduce review timelines. For example, projects may request alternative compliance if they're unable to meet landscape manual requirements due to site configuration that's outside the developer's control. Alternative compliance is granted if the applicant can provide an equal or better quality of landscaping than required by the landscape manual. Another example is when both a preliminary plan of subdivision and detailed site plan are required, applicants may elect to have both preliminary plan and detailed site plan reviewed concurrently. These types of incentives help align private development with public policy goals. They are particularly important in encouraging transit-oriented development and increasing housing supply. What we found also when it comes to the detailed site plan and preliminary plan processes is that a lot of the folks in the development community have not really taken advantage of this. One of the things concerns raised were because of the order of approvals that are required in the zoning ordinance. So you have to have the preliminary plan done first prior to the detailed site plan. So they have elected in the past to kind of stagnate a lot of those development approvals going through the process. So now we're at a situation where we're trying to encourage the development community to do them both at the same time. They had that tool in there that a lot of them are not electing to use it because they're so used to doing it the old way. Here we have special exceptions where they allow certain land uses that may be appropriate in a zone but require additional review to ensure compatibility. These uses are evaluated through a public hearing process and must meet specific approval standards. This process provides flexibility while ensuring that impacts on surrounding properties are carefully evaluated. This is another one that I've talked about before in other settings, such as the retreat, where we're saying that special exceptions, we can really look at the process to see how we can kind of streamline that process. We have the opportunities there, and we're definitely willing to take a look at that if it is the will of the council. Variances, they provide relief from strict application of development standards when a property has unique conditions that create practical difficulty. For example, irregular lot shapes or environmental constraints may make it difficult to make setback or height requirements. Applicants must demonstrate that the variance is the minimum necessary relief and that it will not negatively impact the surrounding area. Variances allow reasonable development while maintaining the overall intent of the zoning regulations. Zoning map amendments, commonly referred to as rezonings, they allow the county to change the zoning classification of a property. These amendments are typically considered where there have been a substantial change in the surrounding area or when the original zoning designation was in error. Rezoning can help align zoning classifications with adopted master plans and evolving development patterns. The council plays, as you know, a critical role in evaluating and approving these requests. Now, we do have some additional flexible zoning tools that are out there that may not be, of course, taken in advantage right now when it comes to our current zoning ordinance, but however, there are other jurisdictions in the DMV region and across the country that take advantage of these. Flexible zoning tools do play a key role. And so to begin, there could be an establishment of by right mixed-use zoning within a half-mile of major transit stations. Other jurisdictions have done things like that. You can allow residential office and retail uses without additional discretionary approvals or reduce parking minimums to reflect transit accessibility. I think that's one of the things that the state's really considering now as well. Also, this approach could accelerate transit-oriented development and increase ridership. Also, jurisdictions like Arlington have demonstrated that by right transit zoning attracts consistent private investment. We also could adopt firm development review timelines to provide certainty for investors. I think one of the ones we currently have is regarding that 70-day mandatory action timeframe. Establishing maximum review periods for site plans, special exceptions, and administrative approvals would be important here. Predictable timelines reduce financing risks and project delays, and developers also prioritize jurisdictions where approval schedules are clear and reliable. Time certainty can be as valuable to developers as financial incentives a lot of times. Also, these recommended flexible zoning tools allow developers to receive we could allow them to receive automatic density increases. I think the prior zoning ordinance allowed that, I believe, as well. Also, qualifying benefits may include affordable housing, open space, green building features, structured parking. Density bonuses provide a transparent and predictable incentive structure. This tool aligns private development interests with public policy objectives. Administrative bonuses avoid lengthy discretionary review timeframes as well and processes. Also, they could reduce or eliminate parking minimums, like we talked about earlier, encourage shared parking strategies. I think the new zoning ordinance has some ideas in there as well. Structured parking significantly increases development costs, as you all know. As you see on the screen here, we find many situations where per parking space, it could be $30,000 to $50,000 per space. So it's really expensive to do that. However, this is one that if they do provide that, that could be an incentive as well. In addition to looking at additional parking reform to support walkable and transit-supported communities. We also could look at establishing redevelopment overlay zones for aging shopping centers and commercial corridors, provide height density and FAR incentives to encourage reinvestment. These will allow flexible land uses to support mixed-use redevelopment and simplify the approval process for redevelopment projects. These overlays can help transform underperforming retail areas into vibrant mixed-use centers. Also, we could look to encourage the reuse of obsolete office and retail buildings that we do have in Prince George's County. One example of that is along Oxon Hill Road. We had a office building over there right near the Home Depot, where now has been transformed from an office building into an apartment building. So that is an option for us as well. Also, to further allow those conversions to take place, and more so, but in a mixed use or institutional type fashion. We see a lot of that when you see a lot of churches going into the shopping centers as well. Also to provide zoning flexibility, parking reductions, and expedited approvals. I think one of the concerns that has been raised from the development community that really came out of our charrette back on February the 25th was regarding the relief from the zoning ordinance, and there really isn't a lot of relief. However, I think a lot of times that was truly the intent of the zoning ordinance, because we wanted to demand high quality development, and we indicated as a part of those development standards in the zoning ordinance what that looks like. So there could be an opportunity where we could have that flexibility built in there, but with another eye taking a look at it, such as waivers or other departures if we open up the departure area of the zoning ordinance. We can expand the authority of planning staff to approve minor zoning adjustments administratively, allow modest increases in building height, FAR, setbacks without requiring public hearings. Administrative flexibility allows projects to respond to site constraints. This approach significantly reduces approval timeframes for projects, and director level approvals maintain oversight while streamlining development review processes as well. A lot of times, again, that goes back to the time frame that the developers really appreciate, and the predictability as well. Let's see here. Without getting ahead of the existing mixed-community housing study that we do have going on right now, we could also introduce zoning that supports housing types between single-family homes and large apartment buildings, such as duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes, and small apartment buildings. As you know, missing middle housing expands housing options for moderate income households. It also, these housing types integrate well into existing neighborhoods. Increasing housing supply supports workforce housing and economic growth. Also, we could look at establishing a program that transfers development rights. A lot of jurisdictions do that as well, from rural or environmental sensitive areas to growth centers. Preserve agricultural land and environmental resources. They can do that as well. It will direct higher density development toward the areas with existing infrastructure, such as supporting our transit-oriented areas in the county. These programs could support balanced growth in Prince George's County, and the tools could align with land preservation goals and the economic development objectives. We could also look at designating priority development projects that receive enhanced county support and provide expedited review timeframes. I think the county executive and the county council have been really supportive of the permit rapid response program that DPI has initiated and been heading up, and we've been participating on. So that is definitely one that could be another tool in the toolbox as well. Also looking at potential utilization of conditional approvals to reduce review timeframes, such as the zoning map amendment, the special exceptions, preliminary plans, and others. The Catalyst program could signal that the county is a proactive partner in development, and strategic projects can transform key corridors and activity centers as well. Prospective outcomes as it relates to this would be implementing these zoning reforms throughout Prince George's County to attract greater private investment, expand housing supply, revitalize commercial corridors, and grow the county's tax base. Flexible zoning tools create a more predictable development environment and ensure that the county remains competitive with neighboring jurisdictions. And flexible zoning tools can also play a role in addressing the county's housing and economic development objectives. They allow underutilized properties to be redeveloped with higher value uses that contribute to the commercial tax base. They also help facilitate new housing development, including mixed income and transit-oriented housing. Ultimately, these tools help the county remain competitive in attracting investment and development. Right here. There we go. In summary, the 2022 zoning ordinance provides a set of tools that allow the county to manage growth strategically. Flexible zoning mechanisms allow us to support the redevelopment, increase housing opportunities, and strengthen the county's economic base. Continued coordination between the planning department and the council is essential to ensuring these tools are used effectively. Thank you for the opportunity to provide this briefing, and we welcome any questions by the committee. And we've got our team ready to go.
Thank you for your presentation, Councilmember Janoga.
A lot of good ideas here. A lot of questions. I have a specific question about a specific property that brought to my attention, but it raises issues across the board. And you probably, if I mention this, somebody might know what it is, but somebody has a signage issue. And I was surprised to learn that in the IE zone, that the height limit for a sign is 18 inches. That wasn't the main issue, but they said that there was an opportunity for a 30% modification. I looked through the zoning ordinance for 20 minutes and could not find a 30% or any kind of modification. Is there such a thing as a 30% modification?
Yes, it's under the departure and waiver section of the ordinance. So you would actually have to go under that application type in the ordinance, and then it gives a table of all of the standards you might get a departure or waiver from.
Okay, if you could give me the code section for that at your convenience.
Yes.
So I'm trying to remember back when the new ordinance came in. I thought that there was a goal to kind of either get rid of or cut back on modifications to development standards and departures.
Yes, so the current ordinance is very limited to the standards that you can get a departure or waiver from, whereas the prior ordinance kind of said you can get a departure from any standard. The current ordinance seeks to limit that, again, to uphold really the quality of development. And so I think that's one of the things Mr. Hahn was talking about in flexible zoning tools. And it may not necessarily be a departure, right? If, you know, there may be other tools we can use to still uphold that quality without allowing a simple departure or a lesser standard.
Okay. These two, I have two things that go together about density bonuses and transfer development rights. So 20 years ago, I led the transfer development rights effort with Mr. Olson was there, legislation that failed. And then there was a transfer development right task force created at some point more recently, which, as far as I know, came up with nothing. And the problem has always been that there's plenty of density to transfer from the agricultural area, but there's nobody that wants density in the places that would make sense. Around the metro stations, there's already more density than people know what to do with. So I don't know if there's a new idea for how we get a transfer development rights program, because the slide talks about bringing them to basically metro areas, and most of those places are already in some level overzoned, which raises the second point, talking about density bonuses for various types of development. The places that would make the most sense already have significant density that they might not even be using. So how good of a tool are these density bonuses?
Well, these are just ideas at this point in time. We would have to, for each one of these recommendations that we came up with, to your point, we really would have to dig into them a little bit more. These are just ones that are kind of the tools that are in the toolbox that we're able to identify. But to your point, we really would have to look at to see where they would be applicable and best most appropriate throughout the county.
I mean, I think the density bonuses and transfer development right, which is basically density bonuses you buy, great ideas. Implementation seems very difficult, and it's not really been solved in the past. So if you're serious about that, you really need to dig in with your staff and figure out how or where would that make sense. And then in terms of timelines, definitely need to streamline some timelines. I know the chair is going to be working on that. Apologize. You've had me work on other stuff. Yeah. That's next. But the plan development timeline, that's the one that I've heard developers say, or the zoning lawyers, well, we don't want to do a PD because it's going to take even longer than a regular zoning map amendment. Do you agree with that? And do you have ways to shorten the time period so that they're incorrect?
So we have heard that same complaint as well internally, and what we've talked about as of, I think we talked about the late fall of 2025, identifying measures to reduce those timeframes, and that's more so an internal coordination effort. One of the concerns that was raised was regarding the public benefits, and what were identified as could be counted as public benefits. We had certain situations where developers were wanting to propose transportation improvements that were going to be required at the time of preliminary plan. So it's like, you can't have a public benefit that's going to be required later on. Right. I need to make sure that Prince George's County is going to get the best and the most out of this because there are going to be higher impacts to those adjacent residents in those communities. So that was one of the concerns that was originally raised. And so we looked at, and we were working through identifying some key public benefits that developers could look at first and identify and say, okay, out of this list that we have, you can pick those and they can definitely be utilized. Some of those were like community spaces, right? Some of those were related to other public facilities in the community that were out there, parkland, all these other areas that were out there, there were opportunities. So we're looking at identifying that key list and providing that to them to shorten that, so it's not so much of a back and forth that takes place as it relates to that proposal going through. In addition to that, we are trying to, from our side, adhere to, when it comes to a lot of our applications, the 70-day, although it may not be required, we still try to adhere to that 70-day time frame, although may not be there. So we try to do a further coordination effort. We also are trying to look at what we'd like to see, if we could, related to, let's say, conditional approvals. If you do get, you have to go down the process of getting, let's say, a PD, and then the preliminary plan, obviously, and maybe a detailed site plan later, that if we could all do that concurrently, however, understanding that the other two following that, like the preliminary plan and the detailed site plan, are conditioned based upon the approval of that zoning map amendment. So that's kind of what we have out there, and that would shorten the timeline and streamline at the same time, so they get all their approvals basically at once, so to speak, and then of course continue on to get the council's approval for that zoning map amendment, as well as the detailed site plan too. So there are other tools that we are looking into.
And that makes a lot of sense. It's kind of, at some level, like the old comprehensive design zone with compressing all the phases together. Similar to that concept. I guess the last thing I want to ask, 5 months for a special exception. Now, I know the zoning lawyers have said forever it's 18 months. I said if you know what you're doing, you can do it in 7 months, and if you get some support on this side of the table. But I cannot see 5 months. So what's the math that gets you to 5 months for a special exception? Because the only math I can see is the public being cut out of the process.
Oh, no, we would continue to keep the public, obviously, into the process. One of the things that we have is that the planning board would have to vote to transmit that document over to the zoning hearing examiner. So one of the things we're looking at internally is whether or not is that required? Is it needed for that transmittal for the planning board to vote to transmit? So we'll talk through that.
I think that's in state law, right?
So I've got to take a look. That's one of the things.
We've talked about this before. It would be great to have it transmitted immediately, but there's a state law requirement. I think Mr. Kumar pointed this out last year.
Yeah, so to your point, yeah, that's one of the things we would take a look at as a part of the timing portion of it. So that would take out the timing there, potentially, if that were indeed an option for us. In addition to that, we'd have to coordinate very closely with the applicant to make sure they meet all the standard submittal requirements as well. Also coordinate with the zoning hearing examiner's office on those options. We would work through and keep that on a 70-day time frame, and then kind of push that in. I don't know. We're just throwing out the 5-month time frame, thinking that it would be an option or a possibility there. My biggest concern, to your point, I don't want to cut the public out of that process at all, because right now we have, I think it's a 30-day public notice period. There's some jurisdictions that do 2 weeks. I don't think that's necessary here. I don't think we need to do 2 weeks. I'm good with the 30 days. I think that's good. We've had a standard here, kept that standard, and it meets I think a lot of the citizens really appreciate that too. I have to do the count
Looking at
back.
the 5 months math, I would assume that does not include the 30-day pre-application meeting.
Correct. It does not. This is after acceptance.
Yeah,
So
okay.
30 days. So that 5 months will be after acceptance from planning staff and notification. And then also the question would be, and I'm just going to put it on the table, with the zoning hearing examiner rendering that decision. So,
Understood.
oh yeah, okay.
Yeah, that they have to be energized. I have my own thoughts about that. We can always talk about offline. Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're welcome. Vice Chair Olson?
Thank you. I had the same question, discussion about density bonuses. I mean, I remember trying to do that in the past, and I was told, well, we can't really do that because we already give away all the density, basically. So, so I don't know how that would work, but appreciate. Well, right, but there's push and pull to all that, right? I mean, it's so that bears more discussion, clearly. I wanted to talk a little bit about the administrative flexibility and how those decisions are made. I mean, those are not mandated, but just because you have that flexibility doesn't mean that those are automatically allowed. So what would be the process? And I will say, I've supported, that in the past, for certain projects. We have had that ability. Adding an additional floor or something, as long as, the local people are okay with it. I do understand the need for some flexibility, but I also don't want to see it abused.
Correct.
Because, the public has been guaranteed, and gone through a process and all that. So could you talk a little bit about the considerations and are there internal guidelines for that, or is it just a, I mean, I'm not going to say whim, but, these are important things to talk about.
So one of the things is related to the use table. Kind of starting off there, the county executive earlier this year, she made mention of taking a look at the use table and the requirements there. Certain things, and then also digging into the zoning ordinance. I know, I think under maybe it was CB 15, or actually whenever the zoning ordinance was adopted, the conversation was to have an in-depth look every year regarding an annual text amendment to that zoning ordinance, and look at the processes that we have and say, okay, depending on what the applicant's preparing to do, is it necessary? And looking at the threshold for, let's say, a detailed site plan, for example, a lot of jurisdictions have the threshold. We have it at 25,000 square feet. Right. And then, however, in other jurisdictions, they may have it at 50,000 square feet. And that's what we've seen before. So do we take a look at relaxing that and increasing that threshold? Also, with the planning director, are these, if you increase the threshold from, let's say, from having from 25,000 to 50,000 square feet, is this a planning director level approval that would take place? Is that what we're going to say? So the planning director would have the authority to review that application and provide, make the recommendations whether or not it was approved at that point. So there's some aspects within, I would say within certain standards, because I want to make sure that the commission and the department and the county is very clear on what those expectations and the standards are. So it's not something that's arbitrary that the planning director is making. And that goes for across the board. I want to make sure that's very clear. And also that's similar to what we do with our alternative compliance as well. We want to ensure that, if the applicant's not able to meet those standards, it's something equal or better to that. So the county is getting something out of this versus not. So we take a look at those different standards. So those are some areas we could look at. Also expanding when it comes to special exceptions. I don't know the council how they would feel about this, but having certain special exceptions maybe at the with the be minors, let's say special exceptions, and that be at the approval of the planning director. Same situation there as well, under certain standards and
I'm
requirements.
sorry, yeah,
So
explain that. I mean,
so when
special
you,
exceptions
as far
are
as
not.
when you look at a special exception, you have the use there. If it's a minor, let's say if it's a special exception, I don't know, for looking at the daycare center use, for example, that's some certain areas that's requiring the special exception, but there's a threshold in there that's indicated. If we can kind of say, okay, that's something, if one's required, then that would be left, if it, depending, let's say if it's, let's say 10 to 15 kids, right, for a daycare center or a small daycare center, then that would be one that could be approved at the planning director level, depending on certain findings, as long as the applicant meets those required findings that the council has set forth. However, going above whatever that threshold is, that definitely would be a full-out special exception to be heard by the county or district council to make that decision at that stage. But kind of looking at things at more of a threshold level, if they're making the larger, more impactful concern or requests that come in, they go definitely to the council, for that decision to be made. But to be able to kind of shorten the time frames, to be able to, for those smaller projects, potentially look at that. Even when it comes to, there are certain areas of, when I'll say, I know Chair Oyata's made it very clear, I think in the legislation, that there's an opportunity there to look at certain uses, such as the daycare use, and see if we can streamline that. I am me personally, I'm all on board. When I was in Alexandria, that's what we did. These are uses that are supporting the community, and it makes no sense adding another level of bureaucracy in there. We remove that bureaucracy and as long as the standards are there, the state already has regulations that are already applicable at the same time, let's move that forward. So there are certain areas we want to make sure that's done. However, we understand that there are certain areas that, the community has some concerns with. So let's keep that in there, okay? So that's what we really want to focus on doing, just kind of taking another look at the zoning ordinance and saying, hey, these areas we want to keep with the council. These areas, with all due respect, I don't think the council really wants to, and I'm not saying don't want to bother with them, but they're really minor. So let's really take a look and identify what's really minor in there. And then those areas that are really, when I say administrative, go straight to permit. That's what we try to do when it comes to the detailed site plan already. Can we expand that and be able to kind of support the development community and not have so many hurdles that are out there that are impactful to them, but we also at the same time want to continue to protect the citizens of the county as well.
No, I think that's helpful, and obviously it does need more, discussion and study. I guess, in some of these, like the 10 to 15% building height increase, I can see situations where that would be a good thing, and I can see situations where that might not be. Would there be, and, look, we have to be very careful about not being political and all that stuff, but we represent the communities, right? So would there be a check-in with, the council member whose area that is, because that would impact, people feel like something has gone through process and they've been involved, and then boom, there's 15% more, density on the site. Like, how would you envision that working?
So we could definitely, I think there was some legislation before making a notification. We can provide notifications to those council members when those applications or requests come through. That could take place. I think even when an application is accepted, I think that's maybe already be out there right now that we're in, making sure to notify the council members on that. So if it was in your council district, we would be sure to notify you as well as the at-large members as well, just to make it very clear and also transparent.
Okay. And, of course, these are all discretionary. Like, these are not, there's no guarantee that someone is going to get, something just because they apply. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay. They have to justify it.
Absolutely, because there have been situations, I will say, even since I've been in my role, where we didn't fully out agree with applicants and what they're proposing. So they have to go back and make some adjustments. We don't accept just anything walking in. We want high quality, and we demand that.
Okay. All right. Well, we look forward to more discussion. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank
you,
you.
Mr. Hunt.
Councilmember Adam Stafford.
Thank you so much, and thank you for your presentation. I wanted to go back to the slide where you were, I don't have the page number here, but the slide discussing tools for shopping center locations. So as I'm looking at my master plans and sector plans, this is a key lever for my community in terms of driving development change. And I wanted to get some clarity on what you would define as low performing, because what I'm witnessing is that a lot of these shopping centers are fully paid off and they have tenants. And to the owners, this appears to be very high performing for them on their end. But for community members who want to see a higher quality of retail or a more diversity of retail, they would have differing opinions. And so when you say low performing, would you characterize that as having a high vacancy rate, or just if maybe you could shed some light on that?
It's more on a high vacancy rate.
Okay.
In addition to opportunities that, let's say, the community has proposed and reached out to you all on, I
Okay.
want to be able to address those concerns, and how you do that these are the options that we have in the toolbox when it comes to your, let's say, your sector or master plan amendment process, in addition to those other flexible zoning tools that we could just put into the zoning ordinance. So it's
Okay.
really identified by the council members, by the community, and give them those options that are out there. It's not to say that that property owner obviously is going to take advantage of that, but this is a tool for them. If they really want to, because we've had situations where we've had shopping centers where they're not able to, they're wanting to propose something, but they're not able to meet those certain requirements because of what the zoning ordinance says. So let's take a look at the zoning ordinance and those tools that we have, and make some amendments there to be able to support them at the same time.
Okay, that's really helpful. And then my next question was around the Development Catalyst Program. Is that for specific areas? Would that be for specific areas?
So you could,
Or we would have to designate that for like a very specific region?
a specific area of the county. So, for
Okay.
example, certain locations, I would say, I think Montgomery County utilizes this on their corridor plans that they have.
Okay.
So you would go through that planning process and could designate those corridors or those areas as it relates to that. And that could be a tool that you could take.
So for example, like with the Blue Line corridor, that would be a
Correct.
permissible. Okay. All right, so that's helpful. And then my last question is around, well, so just generally, I'm really interested in thinking about long-term planning for energy costs. And so there are a lot of housing and transit-oriented development projects coming to my district. And so I know that the planning department does incorporate planning on what energy usage may look like, or what maybe some energy efficient tools that could be used. But I just want to know what the planning department is doing in terms of thinking about opportunities for sharing energy costs in new developments, like creating microgrids that can kind of break up some of the larger power infrastructure here in the county, and can create just more of a buffer so that we don't have over-reliance on larger grids.
I will say from my experience, and I'll turn it over to staff if they have any more on that either, but we have existing in the zoning ordinance those green building standards that we already have out there.
Okay.
And that's a requirement, and wasn't a requirement under the prior zoning ordinance, but it is now a requirement there that they have to adhere to those standards. Now, those are options. When I say the green building standards provides different options for those developers to utilize, and they have to meet whatever that number is for their development. I don't think that took into consideration what, as far as the grid, the electrical grid itself. I think there were options in there for obviously solar. However, I don't think it really took a look at the existing or the adjacent area and the whole grid in that community as well.
Was anyone else gonna, because I haven't.
Now, I was just going to mention, yeah, as well, the green building standards. And then we, of course, have the requirements for electrical vehicle charging stations. That has to, developments have to come into compliance with by 2027. But yes, the green building standards. And as we become, greener and greener, we probably want to take a look at the standards and whether we should increase the minimum thresholds for the green building standards that they need to meet.
And Tom wanted to add something just on this point, so I'll let him and then go back to you.
Sure.
Sherry just hit on the point I was going to make, except I'll be more direct. The green building standards, it's you have to reach a score, and the score is so low, and there's ways to get there without doing anything useful. That it's been on my to-do list, is to look at strengthening these green building standards. That's what, Ms. Adam Stafford, that, I think we really need to take a look at whether these are doing what we need to be done.
Yes, and really my thought here is not adding another layer to the planning process and not adding another sort of bureaucratic step, but basically having the planning department coordinate with utilities or state and federal agencies on energy infrastructure planning for new areas, like as we're thinking about like entire new communities that are being built. This doesn't necessarily have to happen within like an individual development application, but it's like, okay, if we're redoing the Summerfield area, right? It's like, how could we come together and consider microgrid opportunities for anyone that wants to build in this region, so that it's like taking the green building standards to the next level, so it's even more targeted.
I think that is an excellent point. One of the things that we do when it comes to the specific development applications that we have is we of course have to send out referrals to various agencies that are involved in that process. We do incorporate those utilities as well. The issue that we're having is we always don't have the best response. So we're working on how to improve that response and getting better contacts over there. Understanding they've got a lot going on. However, this is a critical effort from Prince George's County, and understanding that for them, this is impacting their future and their support, right? So that's one of the things we will continue to work through to get the best coordination. I will say that with all due respect, after the data center task force, we were able to create better working relationships, especially when it comes to, let's say, PEPCO. So we're working very closely with them a little bit more now, but trying to really get them more involved in the development process, and coordinating with them a lot more and better.
I'm considering putting forward some legislation around helping the council helping with some of this coordination on new planned communities around developing microgrids. So I'd love to talk with you more about that. Thank you.
And Councilman Adam Stafford, I wanted to bring your attention, which you may be aware of, that a few years ago, the planning board approved favorably a mandatory referral for a community of homes that had a microgrid station that was housed in a pocket park to provide that microgrid power services to those homes. I want to send you that report because I do think that was recently, the homes were actually constructed last year in the pocket park, because I saw something on the news, but I'm going to send that to you. And what I would, where we are right now, I would see planning, when it comes to master plans, we can incorporate that as recommendations to encourage that for now, unless it later becomes codified to some degree. I think certain, like with EV stations, I think now it's codified to have certain numbers in certain area for certain uses. So, but I want to send you that report so that you can take a look at it. But I do think that those homes, that project was built, and what they did was they put the microgrid in a small pocket park with 2 benches and a couple of trees. And then the homes that they served are on that row. I think it's about 6 homes.
Yeah, 6 or 7. Yeah.
And I think they were made affordable. I'm not sure, but I'd love to share that with you. So I'll look out for that. I'll send it to the entire.
I think it was in
committee.
Fairmont Heights.
Yes, Fairmont House.
I was gonna ask, we just went and previewed that in
Okay.
Fairmont Heights.
Ruben
They just
County.
opened. So yes, that was a great example. They're net zero homes. And I feel like if we can have that type of intentionality with all of this new development coming online to, provide those examples, I feel like that can help to lessen energy costs over time.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Thank you. And I'll try not to take up too much time because we are going to have the streamline task force. So we'll be meeting a lot over the next 60 days with a deadline to pass something. I think this presentation really helps to, frame some places to start in that conversation. And I definitely like the concept of like a tiered approach. Like, yes, we do want overall our zoning process to be competitively faster in the region. But also there are things that we definitely want to even move faster versus some that we might want to take our time on. And so I do think it's important that we are not thinking about treating all projects, all developments in all places the same.
Right.
So I definitely am leaning into a tiered approach where we're collapsing what just makes sense and what might be redundant processes. But I think the only way we can really get towards incentivizing the development we want to see in the places we want to see them is if those projects either are cheaper to do, they move faster. There has to be some type of economic engine motivator behind it. And I think what we sometimes have done is made everything equal and then wondered why we're not pushing development where we want it. But if they can choose to put it anywhere, what's going to make them go into like inside the beltway, right? So how do we make sure our pilots, our TIFs, our zoning process, our permit process aligns with what we want, where we want it? And so I just thank you for your presentation. I think that these ideas are going to help shape that streamlined process. And I do like the direction of a tiered approach. I think that's where all of us are, because I don't think we want this to be fast tracked for everything. There's things we also don't really like. And so one of the things I also will say I'm interested in, and I don't know if we'll be able to get it to it in the 60 days that we're meeting, but really understanding how to stop the saturation of uses. Like some uses are needed. And so it's not as easy as just like changing the use table and extracting them out, right? It's a layered approach that I'm not really sure how to get to. Maybe the health atlas gets us there. I don't know. But that's just something for us to continue to look at, because I think the uses is the thing that bothers the community more than just the development of the buildings. It's like where we're both not in it anymore, right? And it's permitting takes over, but it's a use by right. And so how do we regulate that more on our end?
Right.
Awesome. Thank
All
you
right.
guys so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation. All right, now we're moving on to our last thing on the agenda, a piece of legislation. We have CR 10/2026, a resolution concerning Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission. I will pass it to our committee director for orientation.
Yes, ma'am. Madam Chair and members of the committee, CR 10 amends the FY 2026 approved operating budget for the Recreation Fund by reallocating recreational programming funds to other community organizations to expand programming opportunities. Ms. Miller-Wide will provide a fiscal and policy analysis of the resolution. I'd like to mention that the County Executive's Office took no position on the resolution. The Planning Department did not have a comment, and the Office of Law found the resolution to be in proper legislative form with no impediments to its adoption. I'd like to turn it over to Ms. Miller-Wide quickly to go over the policy and fiscal note. Thank you.
Good morning, Good morning, Chair Oriada and members of the PHED Committee. CR 10/2026 is transferring certain appropriations from the Recreational Fund of the Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission due to changing needs of organizations approved for project charge funding, and due to the County Council's desires to reallocate resources to take advantage of recreational programming opportunities that were not available at the time of allocation. A breakdown of these allocations can be found on page 3 of the impact statement. Thank you.
Thank you. Turning to the sponsor.
Thank you very much. Yes, this is some reallocation from groups that either couldn't use the funds or missed deadlines in order to restore some funding that was not allocated this past year. And I move favorable. I see Mr. Denoga is in the room. And Ms. Adam Stafford is in the room. Yes.
I have a motion to move favorable. I have a second. Can we call the roll?
Chair Oriata,
Aye.
Councilmember Adam Stafford,
Aye.
Councilmember Denoga,
Aye.
Councilmember Olson.
Aye.
Motion carries 4-0.
Thank you
All
very
right.
much.
Thank you so much. I don't see anything else on our agenda. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Probably move second. All those in favor, aye. Ayes have it. We're adjourned. Thank you.